Knights of Christ, the most feared men in history. The wind roared across the scorched plains of the Holy Land, carrying with it the smell of iron, dust, and death. Under the blazing sun, an army of white-robed knights appeared on the horizon. Their armor shone like mirrors of divine fire, and the red crosses on their cloaks cut through the golden haze of war. They advanced in silence, without shouts, without hesitation, without chaos. To see their march was to witness the impossible, men of prayer transformed into instruments of destruction. They were called the Knights of Christ, and wherever they rode, kingdoms trembled. They were born not of ambition or revenge, but of conviction, of a sacred flame that burned brighter than fear itself. Before drawing their swords, they knelt on the cold stone floor, murmuring prayers that bound their souls to destiny. They swore poverty, chastity, and obedience, renouncing all earthly things to become soldiers of God. They were monks at dawn and angels of war at dusk. For them, the battlefield was not hell, but a cathedral, a sacred ground where faith met fire and death became but the gateway to eternity. When the war trumpet sounded, they rose from their knees and mounted their war horses, forming ranks so precise they seemed sculpted by the hand of heaven itself. Their eyes burned beneath their iron helmets, fixed on the horizon where the enemy's banners fluttered. They were outnumbered, 100 to 1, and yet they never wavered. As one body, they lowered their lances. As one spirit, they advanced. The ground shook beneath their hooves, and the echoing thunder sounded like the wrath of angels. Each Templar believed that God himself rode beside him. They fought not for kings, crowns, or lands. They fought for the divine justice engraved on their souls. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give the glory. This was his prayer, his battle cry, and the secret of his power. For when a man has given his life to heaven, what more can earth take from him? The enemy could break his shields, burn his fortresses, and tear his flesh, but never destroy his faith. This faith was his armor, this conviction, his sword. They were no longer ordinary men, but symbols, living testimonies of a devotion that no pain could shake, and so the world learned to fear them. To cross the path of the Knights of Christ was to face warriors who had already conquered death itself. Yet behind their sacred fury lay a secret, a mystery whispered for centuries. How could mere mortals fight like gods? What truth lay hidden beneath the cross, marked with blood and faith? This is the story of the Knights of Christ, the most feared men in history. In the early 12th century, the world was a battlefield. Holy wars raged in the East, and thousands of pilgrims journeying to the Holy Land faced treacherous roads, hostile tribes, and unforgiving deserts. For many, this sacred journey became a death sentence. It was in this chaos that 9 knights emerged, swearing an oath to protect these travelers. They called themselves the Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon, the Knights Templar. Initially, they were humble men, bound by vows of poverty and an unyielding faith. They lived simply, but their spirits burned with divine purpose. Settling on the ruins of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, they forged a bond between faith and warfare. This small band of warriors soon grew into an elite force, blessed by the Pope and recognized by kings. Their fortresses became armed monasteries where prayer and steel discipline merged. They weren't just soldiers, they were monks of war, fighting with an unbreakable spirit. And as their power grew, so did their legend. Before a man could become a Knight of Christ, he had to die to the world. The Templar initiation ceremony was shrouded in mystery and awe. In a room lit only by torches, the candidate knelt before the altar, head bowed, hands empty. Before the master of the order, he swore poverty, chastity, and absolute obedience, promising to fight to his last breath in the name of God. It was a vow that could not be broken. From that moment on, his life was no longer his own. He ceased to be a free man and became a servant of the faith, a warrior of the temple, a soldier of the Most High. The oath was not symbolic, it was spiritual and eternal. The new knight received a white cloak, a sign of purity, and upon his chest the red cross, a symbol of the blood of Christ and the sacrifice he was willing to repeat. Each point of the cross represented a promise: faith without doubt, courage without fear, love without selfishness, and death without hesitation. This cross was not an ornament, it was a burden, a reminder that his life should burn like a sacred flame until the end. The Templars believed this oath made them invincible, sealing their souls with the seal of eternity. A man who has surrendered all to God fears no sword, no fire, no death. And it was this conviction, this pact of faith and blood, that made the Knights of Christ a force that even hell itself dared not challenge. The invincibility of the Knights of Christ was not merely spiritual, it was forged in body and mind through training few could endure. From dawn onward, the metallic clang of swords echoed through the courtyards of the Templar fortresses. There was no rest, no comfort. Each night was shaped like red-hot iron, tested to the limits of their physical and spiritual endurance. They marched for miles under the blazing sun, carrying heavy armor, trained their horsemen with almost superhuman precision, and fought multiple opponents simultaneously, never showing weakness. Discipline was absolute. One's mistake was the mistake of all. Individual strength meant nothing. True victory lay in unity. But training wasn't limited to the sword. The Templars were taught to master the mind as much as the body. They studied war tactics, siege strategies, foreign languages, and even astronomy, because they believed that knowledge, too, was a divine weapon. They learned to fight without anger, to obey without hesitation, and to die without fear. The body was merely the vehicle, the soul, the commander. Before each battle came prayers. On his knees, the knight raised his eyes to the heavens, asking that his hands be guided by God's will. This fusion of faith and technique made them more than warriors. It made them sacred fighting machines, precise, cold, and unbeatable. Every blow was calculated, every movement a prayer in the form of steel. The Templars' training was more than military preparation. It was a ritual of purification. For at the end of each day, when the sun set over the training ground, only men remained who had ceased to belong to earth, ready to fight, die, and win in the name of heaven. The true power of the Knights of Christ lay not merely in their sharp swords or their unwavering faith, but in something few armies of the time understood: tactical discipline. When the Templars entered battle, every step, every movement, every advance was calculated with divine precision. They transformed the battlefield into a sacred chessboard, where each knight was a piece moved by the same spirit. Their formations were so cohesive that they resembled a single living wall. The first group raised their shields, creating an impenetrable barrier. The second advanced with spears and swords, and the third, composed of heavy cavalry, broke through enemy lines like a bolt of lightning from the heavens itself. The red cross on their cloaks was not just a symbol of faith, it was a psychological weapon. When the enemy saw that color advancing silently, they felt the weight of defeat even before the first blow. The cross reminded them that they were facing men who did not fear death, men who believed they fought on the side of God. And this, more than any sword, destroyed the enemy's spirit. During combat, the Templars never dispersed. They obeyed orders with precision, moving as if they shared a single mind. Each knight knew his place and function, and none placed himself above the mission. This discipline, combined with faith and strategy, made the order a perfect war machine. There was no chaos, no hesitation, only the rhythmic sound of hooves, the gleam of blades, and the certainty that victory was not merely military, but spiritual. The cross guided their steps, the shield protected their faith, and together they became invincible, living proof that war, in the hands of the Knights of Christ, was also a form of worship. The Knights of Christ possessed an invisible weapon, more powerful than the steel of their swords or the wall of their shields. Faith, no army in the Middle Ages understood this kind of strength, because it came not from muscles or strategy, but from the spirit. For the Templars, fear was an earthly illusion, something that disappeared before the certainty that God was on their side. Before each battle, they knelt in silence while the wind blew through their white cloaks, and their red crosses seemed to glow in the sun. Over the years, the Knights of Christ ceased to be mere warriors. They prayed not for victory, but for the courage to fight for divine glory. This conviction transformed them into supernatural warriors. When they advanced, they did so not for themselves, but as instruments of heaven itself. While their enemies trembled in the face of death, the Templars welcomed it as a gateway to eternity. They believed that to die in combat for their faith was to attain paradise, and this made them unbreakable. A man who does not fear the end is unstoppable. Thus their every charge became an avalanche of holy determination. Their battle cry echoed like a prayer, "Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory. Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give the glory." This faith did not weaken them, it shielded them. When blood stained the ground and spears shattered against their armor, the Templars stood firm, certain that the Holy Spirit guided each blow. It was as if the divine dwelled within them. No fear could penetrate hearts sealed by such devotion, and that was why kings, sultans, and entire armies bowed before the truth that the Knights of Christ proved on every battlefield. Faith is the most powerful shield there is. They became a powerful institution, revered and feared by kings, popes, and empires. Their victories in the Crusades had granted them unprecedented wealth, lands, and influence. No other medieval army possessed such reach. Their fortresses were spread throughout Europe and the East, forming a strategic network that united monasteries and castles into a single global force. But along with prestige came fear. What was once seen as a miracle of faith came to be seen as a threat to the power of thrones. The Templars answered not to kings, only to God and the Pope. This independence made them dangerous, because no man could control them. On the battlefield they were invincible. Off it, they were unshakable. They managed their own resources, created a financial protection system, and developed a network of trust so efficient that many historians call it the world's first banking system. Kings placed their fortunes in the hands of the Templars, trusting in their integrity and reputation for justice, but the gold that flowed into their coffers also fueled envy. King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the order, began to view them not as allies but as rivals. Fear grew, fear of their military power, their fortune, and their secrets. Legends began to spread. The Templars held the Holy Grail, relics of Christ and forbidden knowledge. What began as faith turned into mystery, and mystery into suspicion. The Church, pressured by rulers, began to question the order's purity. Thus, the cross that had once symbolized holiness became seen as a dangerous enigma. The world the Knights of Christ had helped protect now turned against them, and the same oath that had made them invincible began to pave the way for their downfall. The dawn of October 13th, 1307 marked the beginning of one of the greatest betrayals in history. Under the orders of King Philip IV of France, the Knights Templar were hunted down like criminals. Fortress gates were broken down, monasteries raided, brothers captured. What had been the army of Christ was now accused of heresy, idolatry, and conspiracy against the Church. It was the beginning of the end, an end forged not by defeat in battle, but by human greed. Philip, indebted to the order and fearing its power, conspired with Pope Clement V to destroy the Templars. In a single night, hundreds were arrested, tortured, and forced to confess sins they never committed. Those who survived the dungeons were taken to the stake. Among them was the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, who faced the flames with a serenity no executioner could understand. Before dying, he raised his voice and cursed the king and the pope, swearing that they would both appear before God within a year, and the prophecy was fulfilled. The fire extinguished their bodies, but not their legend. For the Templars knew that man may be burned, but faith is never consumed. Even after its destruction, rumors arose that some of the order had escaped, taking with them their treasures, manuscripts, and sacred relics. Some fled to Scotland, others to Portugal, where they reportedly resurrected themselves under another name, the Order of Christ, silent heir to the Templar legacy. Since then, stories of their secrets have echoed through the centuries. They say they protected the Holy Grail, that they guarded truths the Church never dared reveal. But more than gold or mystery, the true treasure of the Knights of Christ was the example of courage, faith, and loyalty they left etched in history. They were defeated by the powerful but never forgotten by time. And so the red cross that once shone on the fields of the Holy Land lives on in the world's memory, a symbol of men who defied kings, resisted fear, and proved that the human spirit, when guided by faith, is never truly defeated. Centuries passed, empires crumbled, kings were forgotten, But the name of the Knights of Christ continues to echo through eternity. No army, no matter how powerful, could erase the mark left by these men. They were not just warriors. They were the link between the divine and the earthly, symbols of a faith that transcended the sword. Their courage, discipline, and absolute devotion became the basis of countless codes of honor, inspiring knights, soldiers, and even spiritual leaders for generations. The modern world still speaks of them with reverence and mystery because in some way the Templars represent what humanity seeks most, a purpose so great that it makes life and even death worth facing without fear. The fortresses they built stand as silent witnesses to the greatness they achieved. Their military strategies influenced the formation of armies for centuries, and their administrative structure gave rise to what would later become the European banking system. But above all, what truly survived was not their weapons or riches, it was their unbreakable faith, a faith that transformed monks into warriors and common men into legends. Even under the flames, even under the chains, the Knights of Christ proved that true strength lies not in winning battles, but in never giving up what one believes in. And so, in every story told, in every ruin spared by time, the spirit of the Templars still rides, no longer over the fields of the Holy Land, but over the imagination of humanity. For as long as there are those who believe in justice, honor, and the power of faith, the flame of the Knights of Christ will never be extinguished. If this story touched your spirit, leave your like and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey through the medieval world. In the comments, tell us what you believe to be the true secret of the Knights of Christ. Until the next episode, where history and mystery meet under the same symbol, the cross that time has never been able to erase.